My neighbor filed a lawsuit, claiming I damaged his driveway with my car. In court, he said, she ran over the concrete. I quietly played security footage showing his own delivery truck cracking the driveway. His lawyer whispered, "We're done here." I live in a quiet neighborhood in Dallas, Texas. It's one of those areas where houses are just close enough that you know your neighbors, but far enough apart that you don't have to. I bought my house a few years ago, and for the most part, things were fine. Then Greg moved in. Greg was that guy. The one who acts like the self-appointed HOA president when there isn't even an HOA. He complained about people's trash bins being left out too long. He once knocked on my door to tell me my porch light was too bright. He left passive-aggressive notes on cars parked on the street, even though the street isn't private property. At first, I just thought he was annoying. I figured if I ignored him, he'd eventually get bored and focus on something else. But Greg wasn't just annoying, he was looking for control. I found that out the hard way. One morning, I was pulling out of my driveway, coffee in one hand, running late for work. As I reversed, I saw Greg standing at the edge of his driveway, arms crossed, watching me. I remember thinking, what now? I didn't bother acknowledging him and drove off. But when I got home, he was already waiting for me. "You cracked my driveway." I had barely gotten out of my car. "What?" "You ran over the edge of my driveway, and now there's a huge crack." I looked over. Sure enough, there was a large, jagged crack running across the edge of his driveway. But here's the thing, it looked old. It was dirty, with debris inside, like it had been there for a while. "No, I didn't," I said, keeping my voice even. Greg shook his head, acting like he was doing me a favor. "Look, I get it. Accidents happen. I just need you to pay for the repairs." I wasn't about to agree to that. "I didn't touch your driveway." He didn't even hesitate. "I have security footage." That made me pause. I knew I hadn't run over his driveway. My car is a small sedan, and I always back straight out. There was no way I had caused that damage. "All right," I said, shrugging. "Send me the footage." 2 hours later, I got an email from his lawyer. Greg didn't just try to get me to pay for his driveway, he sued me. I came home from work one day to find a legal notice in my mailbox. I thought it was a joke at first. But no, Greg had actually gone to a real attorney, filed paperwork, and was demanding $2,500 for damages and legal fees. I read through the paperwork. It claimed that I had negligently and recklessly driven over his property, causing substantial and irreparable damage. I had to read it twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't even mad yet, I was just shocked at the level of effort Greg was putting into this nonsense. He could have just asked his own home insurance to cover it. He could have ignored it. He could have fixed it himself for probably half of what he was asking me for. But no. Greg wanted a fight. "All right, Greg. Let's fight." See, Greg made a huge mistake. He assumed I wouldn't fight back. He thought he could intimidate me with a lawyer and that I'd just roll over and pay. He also didn't know I had a security camera of my own. I went through my footage. Sure enough, I found exactly what I needed. A large delivery truck, one of those heavy cement trucks, had pulled into Greg's driveway. It rolled over the exact spot where the crack was. And then, right there on camera, the concrete cracked. I watched the footage 3 times to be sure. There was no doubt. The truck had put too much weight on that edge, and the concrete gave in. I didn't say a word to Greg. I let him think I was panicking. A month later, we ended up in small claims court. I showed up in a simple dress shirt and slacks. Greg showed up in a full suit like he was about to argue a murder trial. His lawyer was there, looking confident. Greg looked smug. I sat down, calm as ever. I had the USB drive in my pocket. The judge asked Greg's lawyer to present the case. The lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, on the morning of date, my client's driveway was severely damaged due to the reckless driving of the defendant. She ran over the edge, causing the concrete to crack. We have security footage confirming the incident." The judge turned to Greg. "Let's see the footage." Greg's lawyer played a grainy, low-quality video from his Ring camera. It showed my car backing out of my driveway. That's it. No visible damage. No sound. No proof. The judge frowned. "Do you have any footage actually showing the driveway being damaged?" Greg shifted uncomfortably. Well, it's obvious she was there," and then the crack appeared. The judge raised an eyebrow. "So, no footage of the damage actually occurring?" Greg's lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, we believe it is reasonable to assume. I stood up. Your Honor, I have security footage of my own that clearly shows what actually happened. Greg went pale. His lawyer visibly stiffened. The judge nodded. Let's see it. I walked up, plugged in my USB, and hit play. Crystal clear, high-resolution footage filled the courtroom screen. A cement delivery truck, Greg's own delivery truck, pulled into his driveway, the weight pressing down on the edge. The exact spot where the crack was. Then, boom. The concrete splits. Silence. Greg's lawyer leaned over and whispered something to him. I couldn't hear it all, but I caught 2 words, we're done. The silence in the courtroom stretched. Greg's face had gone completely red. His lawyer stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. The judge turned to me, then back to Greg. Mr. Gregg, do you have an explanation for this? Greg opened his mouth, then closed it. His lawyer whispered something else, but he just sat there, clenching his jaw. The judge sighed, rubbing his temple. We'll take a short recess. I walked out into the hallway, feeling pretty good. Greg had 0 chance now, and I knew it. But as I stood by the water fountain, I heard footsteps. It was Greg's lawyer. He cleared his throat. Listen, he said, keeping his voice low. We can drop this, no problem. No one needs to win or lose here. I tilted my head. That's not how lawsuits work. He forced a smile. What I mean is, we can call it a misunderstanding. No hard feelings. I let that sit for a second. Then I grinned. No deal. His smile twitched. You sure? My client is willing to negotiate. I shook my head. I came here to win. Not negotiate. He exhaled sharply and walked away. I went back inside, still buzzing from that conversation. Greg and his lawyer were scrambling. And that meant one thing, they were hiding something. 15 minutes later, court resumed. The judge sat down, looking more annoyed than before. Mr. Gregg, do you have anything to say about the footage? Greg sat up straighter. Yes, Your Honor. That footage is misleading. I actually laughed. Out loud. Greg scowled at me, then turned back to the judge. That was just one instance. The driveway was already weak. The damage was small. Then the defendant finished it off when she ran over it. The judge looked at me. Do you have footage of the defendant running over the crack? I sat back. No, because it didn't happen. Greg's lawyer jumped in. Your Honor, the burden of proof lies on both parties. If she can't prove her car never touched the crack, we can't rule it out entirely. I narrowed my eyes. This was a desperation move. But before I could say anything, the judge sighed. Mr. Gregg, the footage clearly shows a heavy truck causing the damage. Your own truck. If you can prove that the defendant also damaged the driveway, I'll allow it. Otherwise, this case is over. Greg straightened up. I have more footage. My stomach dropped. He pulled out a USB drive and handed it over. The judge plugged it in. The screen flickered, and suddenly, there I was. My car. My driveway. Me. And then, Greg's driveway. It was a different angle, but I could clearly see my car rolling backward. It looked like I had driven over the crack. I clenched my fists. That's fake. Greg's lawyer smirked. It's a security recording from Mr. Gregg's home system. I turned to the judge. This is edited. Greg shook his head. No, it's not. The judge leaned forward. Do you have proof that this footage has been altered? My mind raced. I knew I hadn't touched that driveway, but the video looked too real. If I couldn't prove it was fake, I was screwed. Then I remembered. I sat up straight. Your Honor, I'd like to request a forensic review of the video. Greg stiffened. His lawyer's smirk disappeared. The judge nodded. That's reasonable. If the video has been tampered with, we need to know. Greg's lawyer panicked. That's unnecessary. This footage is completely authentic. But it was too late. The judge looked at me. Do you have reason to believe this video is manipulated? I nodded. Yes, because my security system runs 24/7. I can pull up the original time-stamped footage, unedited. Greg's jaw tightened. He knew he had just walked into a trap. His lawyer sighed. Your Honor, I think we should reconsider how we proceed. The judge leaned back. I think we should, too. Then he turned to Greg. Sir, I need you to be very careful about what you say next. Greg swallowed hard. Because we both knew this just got a whole lot worse for him. The courtroom was so quiet, I could hear Greg breathing hard. His face was locked in a tight grimace, like he was trying to figure out how deep of a hole he had just dug for himself. The judge tapped his pen against the desk. Mr. Gregg, I'll ask again, are you certain this footage is authentic? Greg didn't answer. His lawyer shifted in his seat. I'd like to remind you, the judge continued, that submitting falsified evidence in court is a serious offense. I sat still, my pulse picking up. This was the turning point. Greg could double down on the lie, or he could try to backpedal. Either way, he was screwed. But then, he did something I didn't expect. He stood up, hands clenched into fists, and turned toward me. His face was red with fury. You think you're so smart, huh? He spat. You think you can just move in and do whatever you want? I blinked. What? This is my neighborhood, Greg snapped. I've lived here for years. I make sure things stay in order. And then you come along, parking your car like you own the place, setting up cameras, acting like you're above the rules. I stared at him. The judge frowned. Mr. Gregg, I don't see how this is relevant. She doesn't belong here, Greg interrupted. The entire room went dead silent. The judge's expression darkened. Excuse me? I let out a slow breath. There it was. Greg didn't care about the driveway. He never did. He wanted me gone. Greg's lawyer was sweating now. He leaned over and whispered furiously to his client, but Greg ignored him. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, if I may. I'd like to point something out about Greg's video. The judge nodded. I stood up and walked to the screen. You said this footage is from Greg's security camera, correct? Greg's lawyer cleared his throat. Yes. I tapped the screen. Then why is there no timestamp? The courtroom murmured. Greg's lawyer froze. Greg's face twitched. Because they both knew, security cameras always have timestamps. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Gregg, can you explain why your video doesn't have one? Greg looked like a caged animal. His lawyer stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Your Honor, we request a recess. No, the judge said flatly. Mr. Gregg is going to answer. Greg didn't say a word. His lawyer tried one last time. Your Honor, even if the footage is incomplete, my client, then the courtroom door burst open. And an officer walked in. The officer, a tall man with a serious expression, approached the judge and handed him a folder. The judge flipped it open, his eyebrows shooting up. What is this? He asked. The officer cleared his throat. We received an anonymous tip about possible fraudulent activity involving Mr. Gregg. We conducted a preliminary review. I felt a chill go down my spine. The judge's lips pressed into a thin line. He looked at Greg. Sir, are you aware that filing false insurance claims is a criminal offense? I sucked in a breath. What? Greg's lawyer went pale. I don't know what you're talking about, Greg stammered. The judge tapped the papers in front of him. It seems someone reported driveway damage to their insurance company weeks before this lawsuit was even filed. The claim was rejected because the inspector found evidence of pre-existing structural damage. I felt my jaw tighten. Greg wasn't just trying to pin this on me, he had already tried scamming his insurance. And when that didn't work, he figured I'd be an easier target. His lawyer sat down slowly, rubbing his forehead. I could almost hear Greg's brain short-circuiting. And then he did something I'll never forget. He ran. Greg bolted from his seat, shoving his chair aside so fast it nearly fell over. He sprinted toward the door. The officer reacted instantly. Sir. Stop. Greg made it 3 steps. Then the officer grabbed his arm and yanked him back so hard that Greg stumbled and hit the floor. Papers went flying. Everyone in the courtroom stared. Greg struggled like a maniac. This isn't fair. This isn't fair. The officer pinned him down. You're being detained for attempting to flee a legal proceeding. Greg kept thrashing. This is your fault, he yelled, glaring at me. I just stared back. Because honestly, I had nothing to say. He did this to himself. The judge called for an immediate halt to proceedings. The officer escorted Greg out of the courtroom, still yelling about how he was being set up. His lawyer didn't even try to defend him anymore. He just sat there, rubbing his temples like he had the worst headache of his life. As for me, I walked out of that courtroom without paying a cent. And something told me Greg's problems were only just beginning. Greg was dragged out of the courtroom, his shouts echoing down the hallway. His lawyer sat frozen, staring at the table, probably wondering if he should have chosen a different profession. The judge looked beyond irritated. "Court is adjourned," he said. "For now." The moment he stood up, the tension broke like a snapped wire. People started whispering, some even laughing in disbelief. I just sat there, my mind racing. What just happened? Greg had spent months trying to screw me over. He had lied in court. He had faked evidence. He had filed a fraudulent insurance claim. And now? Now, he was under arrest. But something still didn't sit right. I gathered my things and stepped into the hallway, watching as Greg was marched toward the exit. His hands weren't cuffed, but the officer had a firm grip on his arm, making sure he didn't pull another stunt. Then, Greg turned his head and looked right at me. And he smiled. That smile hit me like a punch to the gut. What did he have to be smiling about? His reputation? Ruined. His case? Destroyed. His legal problems? Only beginning. Yet, he wasn't panicking anymore. He looked satisfied. And that's when it hit me. Greg didn't just want to win. He wanted to drag me down with him. Before I could say anything, his lawyer, who had been completely silent this whole time, finally spoke. "This isn't over." I turned to face him. "Excuse me?" He straightened his tie, looking exhausted but determined. "Greg has money. He can fight this in court for months, maybe years. Even if he loses, he'll keep making your life a mess." This isn't about the driveway anymore. A cold wave ran through me. Greg wasn't trying to win a lawsuit. He was trying to ruin me. I watched as Greg was escorted through the front doors, but before they left, he looked back one last time. And then he spoke. Loud enough for everyone to hear. "I should have done this the first time." The first time? The words nagged at me. I turned to Greg's lawyer. What does he mean by that? The guy exhaled through his nose. He looked tired. Then, he said it. "This isn't the first lawsuit he's filed." My stomach dropped. "What?" The lawyer shrugged. "Greg's done this before. Multiple times. He finds someone new in the neighborhood, picks a fight, drags them through the legal system, and drains them financially. Some people settle. Some move away. But he always wins in one way or another." My hands curled into fists. This wasn't just a personal grudge. This was a pattern. Greg had been running people out of the neighborhood for years. I suddenly remembered how the family across the street moved out only 6 months after Greg arrived. How my next-door neighbor mentioned a weird lawsuit a couple years back, but never gave details. I had walked straight into his game. But this time, he lost. Over the next few weeks, things escalated fast. Greg was hit with criminal charges for insurance fraud. Filing false evidence in court? That didn't help his case, either. His lawyer dropped him. Fast. And then, his past came back to haunt him. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. More people started talking. Stories started lining up. One guy said Greg had once sued his landscaper for ruining his lawn. Another neighbor claimed Greg tried to get their house condemned over a noise violation. Someone else said Greg had once faked an injury on someone's property and demanded a payout. It was never ending. But the best part? His former neighbors came forward. People who had moved away because of Greg. And they all had records. Emails. Old legal notices. Even screenshots of Greg bragging online about how he had handled people. By the time the DA got involved, it wasn't just one case. It was a full-blown investigation. One afternoon, about a month later, I was outside watering my lawn when I saw a moving truck in Greg's driveway. He was leaving. I wasn't surprised. His house had been put up for sale in a rush. His legal battles were piling up. The neighborhood had turned against him. And he knew it. But as I watched from my porch, Greg walked toward me. He stopped at the edge of my yard. He wasn't smiling anymore. For the first time, Greg looked small. Like he had finally realized he wasn't in control anymore. I crossed my arms. "You need something?" His jaw tightened. "You think you won?" I tilted my head. "Didn't I?" His eyes darkened. "You don't get it. I'm not the only one like me. There are people everywhere who will do worse." People who don't play by the rules. You're lucky, I just wanted to mess with you. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Then I guess you picked the wrong target. He didn't answer. Instead, Greg turned and walked away. Greg sold his house at a loss. He left town with multiple lawsuits hanging over him. The last I heard, he was trying to fight charges in another state. As for the neighborhood, things finally felt normal. People stopped whispering. There were no more complaints. No one got mysterious legal threats over nonsense. I started sleeping better. One day, while checking my mailbox, my next-door neighbor, a retired teacher named Mrs. Patel, walked up with a smile. You did good, she said. Most of us just ignored him. But you? You fought back. I smiled. Had to. She nodded. He messed with the wrong one. And you know what? She was right. Greg thought he was untouchable. That he could lie, cheat, and manipulate his way through life. That no one would fight back. But eventually, everyone meets their match. I didn't just win a case. I stopped a predator. And no matter where Greg ended up, he knew it too. So yeah, maybe he'll try this again someday. But if he does, I hope he remembers how badly it went the last time. And who made it happen? Me.